We're supposed to be in Boca this morning, but it's at a whole new level, and we figured we'd stick to the news now. We were excited about talking about the run-up to the midterms and meeting with voters.
Maybe we can go there next week.
We'll
I'd
try.
like to go there next week.
We'll try. Along with Joe, Willie, and me, and as you saw, Michael Steele. He is the former chairman of the Republican National Committee. We also have former U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Alabama and MSNBC contributor Joyce Vance, former FBI Special Agent and MSNBC contributor Clint Watts, and Donny Deutsch is with us as well. So let's get to what we know in the nationwide manhunt in connection to those pipe bombs sent to leading Democrats and critics of the president, including 2 former presidents. Senior law enforcement officials tell NBC News that investigators are now looking into whether some of those packages passed through the same mail facility in Florida, possibly those addressed to Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, John Brennan, Eric Holder, and Maxine Waters. Officials are now dealing with 10 separate packages that are all similar. The latest was a second package addressed to former Vice President Joe Biden, which was intercepted at a mail facility in Wilmington, Delaware. Early yesterday morning, a similar package was discovered at Robert De Niro's production company in Lower Manhattan. All of the devices are now being examined by the FBI in Quantico, Virginia. Investigators tell NBC News that at least some of the devices were poorly made and had no possibility of exploding. We're told it is unclear if the flaws were intentional to make a convincing hoax or just a bad design or construction.
Joyce, this is very personal to you. Your father-in-law was a federal judge who was killed by a pipe bomb. Talk about this sort of investigation. How do authorities approach this sort of investigation? And talk about the real risk, how it changed your family's life, these sort of attacks.
You know, bombers are a unique kind of criminal. They try to inspire fear, but they're cowards. They're not willing to engage or put themselves at risk. They act from afar. So investigators start off using that psychological profile. Typically, they're looking just for a single bomber, someone who will maybe even have no prior criminal history. This is an unusual and a very interesting situation because it appears that it's possible that there could be more than one person working on the bombings. We have mailings, we have deliveries. So investigators will look not just at the devices for their physical characteristics, they'll also be trying to decide what the profile of the person or people involved will be in this situation, and most importantly, identify them, bring them to justice so that they provide no further threat to people. Once that threat is minimized, once they have people in custody, then they can work further on investigating why and how much.
Clint Watts, let's just talk about the gravity of this incident. And because of the list of the targets, you have 2 former presidents, President Obama's family as well, his wife and daughters, former First Lady. You've got a former Vice President, a former Secretary of State in Hillary Clinton, a former Attorney General, a former CIA Director, a sitting Congresswoman, Robert De Niro, George Soros. As you look at the profile of these people, obviously, as we know, and you know, the FBI doesn't know who did this yet or which people did this. But you look at that list, and obviously you can make a characterization of what kind of person the target was. They've all been prominent critics of President Trump. Where would the FBI be looking this morning exactly?
I think one thing the FBI would definitely do is keep all options open. If you go back historically and you look at where mistakes were made in investigations like this, it was jumping down one theory too quickly. Think back to the D.C. snipers and the white box truck that wasn't. Think back to even the anthrax plot, which was thought to be maybe related to terrorism, but turned out wasn't. They're going to keep all possibilities open at this point. I think Joyce made an excellent point about the way this is played out is it may not be just one bomber. You're talking about some deliveries and some via mail. You've seen them go to that mailing facility down in Florida now. And Secretary Nielsen said, you know, we're pretty convinced at least that some of these came from within Florida. At the same point, one of the first stories that I saw said that the one at George Soros' house was actually a delivery. This could mean it could be a team. They could be loosely organized or affiliated. You could have different bomb makers or bomb types. And I imagine that the FBI is trying to stay very wide at this point in the investigation. The one sort of silver lining of it's not good news, it's a bad situation, but an opportunity is the bombs are not detonated, which means you have lots of human forensics, you have lots of evidence to go off of, and there's lots of visual clues. I looked at one of the packages, John Brennan, for example. They tried to send a package to the former CIA director. They sent it to the wrong location. He actually is a contributor here with NBC News and MSNBC, not CNN, and there was a misspelling. Each of those little clues is a forensic thing, whether it's psycholinguistic or human forensics that you can look for. And I imagine this investigation is moving very rapidly. One thing our politics has done over the last couple years is as many people think they could get away with this or it's not that big of a deal. This is going to be a really big deal. These are federal officials. These are people that are being watched. There wasn't real good reconnaissance done. Sending through the mail is obviously going to get picked off by the Secret Service. They're great at their job. And I imagine we're going to see some major advancements in this case through the weekend.
Meanwhile, President Trump continues to take digs at the media. At 2:48 this morning, the president tweeted, "Funny how lowly rated CNN and others can criticize." The post was then quickly deleted. But he then completed his thought 30 minutes later, tweeting, "Funny how lowly rated CNN and others can criticize me."
Wait, this was at 2:30 in the morning?
This is someone's up at night just, what's this about?
Oh, my goodness.
Maybe someone had his phone because this would be weird behavior.
I don't know. Maybe
this
they
would be
did.
someone who
Maybe
doesn't sleep.
He's just very nervous.
Just watches TV.
A lot of things
Anyhow,
happening
can
right
criticize
now
me
inside
at
there.
will, even blaming me for the current spate of bombs and ridiculously comparing this to September 11th and the Oklahoma City bombing. Yet, when I criticize them, they go wild and scream. It's just not presidential. No, I think what's not presidential is mocking your staff when they plead you to beg for unity. I think what's not presidential is when pipe bombs are sent to former presidents and Democratic officials and a former CIA director, that you don't bring them to the White House and stand together and call for unity.
Oh, you know,
I think what's
at
not presidential
least
is asking Democrats and Republicans all to come to the White House and collectively demand a stop to the violence and collectively show unity. That, I will say very calmly, and I'm not screaming, that is terribly unpresidential, terribly un-American, and terribly sad for this country.
Well, you
Joe?
know, yesterday, several prominent Republicans actually backed up the president's sad response to the mail bombs by criticizing news organizations. So get this. The news organizations that had bombs mailed to them, who Donald Trump had been attacking.
Calling the enemy of the people.
And calling the enemy of the people. And the president has been warned time and time again that that sort of rhetoric would lead to violence. Well, these Republicans, I just, it's hard to even
It's hard to fathom.
think that I was ever a member of this party, as
It's
sad and
changed.
pathetic as they are right now. But Republicans actually, instead of offering condolences to the news organizations and the human beings, the sons and the daughters, the moms and the dads that work there, they actually mocked and ridiculed them and attacked them. Here's RNC Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel, Senator Ted Cruz, and Newt Gingrich,
Wow.
who's also the husband to the U.S. Ambassador to the Holy See, attacking reporters.
We have seen the media be unprecedented in their negative coverage of this president. And the president's right in saying, let's have civility in our news coverage. Let's have some fair-minded news coverage in this country and not have the bias that's so strong on other networks, especially.
Look, it's the media doing what the media does, which is any narrative that they can twist against Trump, they will do so.
We'll start with the enemy of the people. I don't think it helps any, except I think that they earn it. Watch CNN. Look, if you're overseas and you watch CNN International, you know the Russians don't have to run any propaganda television. There's no more anti-American network than CNN International.
This is Fox News contributor.
Yeah, I'm a Fox News contributor. I used to work for CNN. I'll just tell you, the culture of that building is so relentlessly hostile that what are you going to call them?
You're going to call them reporters and journalists who pissed off Hillary Clinton's campaign
Yeah.
for 2 years. Hillary Clinton
guilty.
and her campaign will still tell you today that they think that CNN and the New York Times and the Washington Post and Morning Joe and other news outlets that were relentless in asking questions about the Clinton Foundation and about her email server, they will to this day blame the news media for her loss. I mean, that's what happens. But, Donnie, when it happens, whether it's Hillary Clinton who hates the press or the Obamas, who I personally think they had a free pass a lot of times from the press, but they always thought the press was overly hostile towards them. I mean, God, Ronald Reagan was eviscerated by the press. George H.W. Bush, eviscerated by the press. George W. Bush was just absolutely raked over the coals. Hell, even Newt Gingrich, when he was Speaker of the House, was raked over the coals and eviscerated by the press. Never called them the enemy of the people. Never sent out videos caricatures of them beating up CNN. Never called for violence against supporters in rallies. Never did any of the things that Donald Trump is doing that is dangerous and will lead to violence and will lead to these sort of threats.
You know, Joe, we could stay on the air for 24 hours and talk about the atrocities, the attacks on our democracy, starting where you started the show, that with these poor families coming into this country, the same way my grandparents, great-grandparents came from Hungary, and we could all tell stories of our ancestors. That's who we are. Our borders are open, and we take people in. And this caravan is 1 out of 1,000 people addition of immigrants coming in this year. And we could say, well, no, that's not who we are. Yeah, we shouldn't let them in. Or we could also look at our president, who's basically saying bombs are being sent to people. But no, it's not the anger, the rhetoric I'm putting out there. It's not an insane act of terrorists. It's the news people doing it. Now it is on us, Joe. We can't give anybody any more information. If you have not been living in this country for the past 24 months, there is no way to shake the argument at this point other than us now looking in the mirror who we are. If you as an American are seeing what those 3 Republicans said yesterday, if you as an American are seeing the caravan stories, if you as an American are seeing the lies about prescription drugs, if you as an American are not understanding what's happening to health care, that's it. There's nothing more. Joe, we can't deliver the news anymore. We can't do any more messaging. It's baked. And we all need, at this point, and we need to tap our friends on the shoulder and tap their friends on the shoulder, and even maybe going up to some Trump people, not the crazies, and say, we know you like your guy, but maybe there needs to be a little check and balance. It's on us now. It's not on Trump anymore. It's not on those jerk-offs we were just listening to talk. It's not on Ted Cruz. It's on us, man. That's all we got left at this point, because I can't stand any, you and I or Willie, we can't howl at the moon anymore. We can't say it any more clearly. As you and I talk today, there's thousands of messages going out there, all the things we're talking about. It's up to us now. There's nothing more to say. There's just, it's it. That is it. It's 12 days from now. That is it. Look in the mirror. Who are you? Do you believe in this or do you believe in that? Period. I don't know what else we say, Joe.
You know, Willie, whether it's 12 days before an election or 12 days after an election, you know, you just got to get the facts out there. And the facts are that the caravan ain't coming for a couple of months. The facts are that Republicans have tried to repeal Obamacare and pre-existing conditions, and governors like Rick Scott have actually sued to get rid of that guarantee. And, you know, if they lie 12 days after the election, what's our job? It's to tell the truth to the American people.
And you're right, the caravan is the way out for a lot of those candidates, and we saw it no better than in that clip we played as we came into the show at the top of this segment, which was Martha McSally, the Republican running for Senate in Arizona to fill Jeff Flake's open seat. She voted to repeal, as a member of Congress, the Affordable Care Act. She wanted to get rid of Obamacare, which takes care of pre-existing conditions. That's why she doesn't want to answer a question about health care. She explicitly said, using her, her inside voice, and maybe she should use the other one, that let's talk about the caravan. Let's talk about this
Can
thing
we
that we've
talk about
cooked
the
up. Let's talk
caravans?
about the thing that we've baked and cooked
Joe, I just
up.
want to ask you a quick question because, of course, what you speak about TV is the truth. What do you do at this point when everything we've said, we have all said, everybody has said on both sides a trillion times? I don't think there's any human being on this planet that hasn't gotten these messages. What do we do at this point? Like, yes, you got to keep saying it. You got to keep saying it. Is there a different way of saying it? Is there a different movement? Because it's baked at this point. Is there anything else we can do at this moment?
The thing is, Donnie, and of course there are a lot of Democrats that don't really appreciate when I offer suggestions. Just like Michael Steele, I'm sure you got tired of people telling you how to run the RNC, but it seems to me, Michael, that instead of sitting there talking about Donald Trump's tweets, you ought to say, or that he's lying about the caravan, you ought to say, hey, listen, I know that they're, like James Carville used to distract from Bill Clinton by saying, look at the bird over there, look at, you ought to say, hey, keep your eyes fixed on what's going to impact your children, your family, your aging mom, your aging dad, and know that these Republicans have voted not to take Medicaid expansion into their states, and that's going to hurt your mom that has dementia in the nursing facility, and they're working around the clock to take away protection for pre-existing conditions. That's going to impact your young child that has issues. I mean, that's where people live. Instead of talking about the craziness of Donald Trump's tweets, talk to them about where they live and how this is going to impact them. And Donald Trump bragging himself about, tax cuts for billionaires, and then everybody say, hey, we're going to pay for it by gutting health care. I mean, that's where people live, right?
That's exactly where they live, Joe. And that reality, in addition to the rhetoric of cutting these programs, Medicare, Medicaid, et cetera, is being met with the fact that people are opening envelopes now that shows how much their health care premiums are going up starting next year. So that, again, puts pressure on the lack of conversation around tax cuts, because even if you got a tax cut, suddenly that tax cut is evaporated by the fact that you've just seen a 30% increase in your health care premiums as a result of the vote to cut Obamacare. So the reality is there for a lot of Republicans who, like McSally, don't want to go into that space. And so you've got these folks out here, which is the most ironic and hypocritical thing. Republicans out there saying, "Oh well, no, I absolutely voted for preserving this particular part of the plan," when they're leading lawsuits to overturn or to cut Obamacare.
All right.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.